Okay, we're here. One Piece chapter 1072 breakdown. One of the, I wouldn't say more surprising, theory-ridden chapters, theory-breaking chapters, theory confirming, and it's just one of those where, like, if you're a theorist, you're gonna go crazy. I'm sure your mind is just like all over the place once you saw it. And for this, we had to talk to my guy Parvision. What's up, Par?
I couldn't have explained the chapter in a better way. That's exactly how it is, and I'm doing great after, like you said, I didn't expect 1072 to be like this, but the updates came into it, and I said it on my live stream too. I was saying one of the bigger reveals was something that I thought of right off of the first chapter when it came out. I was like, it's this, and then I got gaslit out of it, and then it happened, and I sat back. I was like, damn, I can't even be mad about it, because even if I made a video, I'd still be wrong. That's how crazy of a plot twist this chapter has so many of them. And I think I don't know, I just feel like it just reminds me, I feel like there's so many pre-time skip vibes happening recently, and I feel like this is one of the ones where it's like, ooh, Oda's connecting so many dots. I think that was the thumbnail for your review too. You're the connections. I was like, damn, look at Brago making the connections like me.
Man, it's a lot of connections going on, and I think that's one of my favorite things, where Oda is just showing hey, everything is connected. At this point, everything, it's almost like every action has a reaction, and this led to this, and this led to this. It's no coincidence why this thing is happening, right? And so I think just from this chapter alone, it reinforces some of the things I already knew, but it also makes me think about, wait, am I missing this? Is Luffy not what I think? And I know it's the meme now where it's everybody's a clone. Is Oda a clone, right? It's just it's yo, what's going on? But I think that's the purpose, right? I think I talk about it all the time, where sometimes it's okay, what is Oda trying to tell us, right? As opposed to us having the knowledge that we have and trying to interpret different things, but what is he trying to do? Try to put yourself in the shoes a little bit. He wants us to speculate about clones and who could be clones and what's real and what's not. That's the entire purpose of it. And I think this chapter accomplished that. And it was we will talk about the end, but let's start at the cover story, the Mads cover story. Already fantastic, right? Just out of this world, because technically this is the Aokiji and pudding stuff is a part of this.
Yeah.
Right?
This cover story is probably the one of the best, craziest. I think
probably the best.
I always refer to Enel's cover story as one of the coolest ones, because it's Enel and then the moon, and
then the connections to Vegapunk with Tsukimi and Automata.
But I never thought Germa 66, their cover story, would amount to so much.
No, not at all. I thought it was going to be them recovering Ichiji, or who was captured? Was it Niji?
The brothers, whatever. Who cares?
No matter. Right. I mean, spending time on Niji, but the
Yoji
brothers were
and
captured,
Niji,
and I thought it was going to be just them going back, and then maybe some more character stuff on Judge. Never thought it would amount to freaking Aokiji and pudding. Right?
Yeah.
Who the hell thought we'd get the Blackbeard pirates in the Germa cover story?
The fact that Oda had Caesar literally smoke Katakuri, even that, the fact that I can say that.
It's
BS. I know it is, but it's the fact that I can say that, and there is a panel for that, and then it's a cover story.
So
it's a Germa 66 cover
so
story.
Silly, bro. I hated it so much. But to be fair, there was a time when the cover story we saw two shadows.
Yeah.
Right? And then this is way back then, which is crazy. And there was speculation hey, what if it's the Blackbeard pirates, because Big Mom is in there, right? Mm-hmm. I was what are y'all talking about? Why would Blackbeard go to... Then we gave several different reasons, and one of them was obviously pudding, right? It was hey, pudding is very important. And it's to see it come to fruition, but to what it's leading to giving us the Mads backstory is bro, this is literally madness, bro.
That's an amazing point, because I think Now that I think about it, I think we did the first chapter of last year as well together, and that's when Germa's cover story started, and we're still doing it.
I think so.
I think it was 1037 with like the Zorro stuff, I believe. But and like, and the point that I wanted to drive was like, when the silhouettes came out, there were so many theories about who it is, and I was having a field day. And then there was all the people like, it's just the simplest thing, right? Like, oh, it's gonna be Reiju and Ichiji, and like,
they were downplaying it a little bit.
Yeah, and everyone's looking at the shoes, but like, and then like then they're like, oh, it's these other people, but then it was like, oh, you're looking too far into it because this is shoes.
I don't know why people still do that though. Like,
yeah, and then it's like the shoes were the right thing for us to look at.
Yes.
And then when Ichiji and Reiju ended up showing up, we ended up gaslighting a lot of the like. I remember in my video I said like, oh, it ended up being those two. Like the simple choice ended up being the right one. But then Oda hit us with no. It was Aokiji and Lafitte, or not Lafitte. Van Auger. Yeah, and it's like that's one of those things where it's like, we're 1,000 chapters in it and we still find a way to like gaslight people, like having free thoughts about thinking all of the possibilities, when time and time again, not just the chapters but the cover story support, like, hey guys, you need to be crazy, like whatever you're thinking, Oda's crazier. Like, and if 1,000 chapters didn't prove it to you, like here it is again and again, and 1,072 is again, you know what I mean?
You can't get upset with the community when they speculate on things, and they're things that you like, right? People like speculation, but I think it's gotten to the point where sometimes they want to kind of stop it or curb it, and it's like, yo, you guys are speculating too much now. And then look at this.
Yeah.
Like look at where we are. Like, what if we had speculated back then, like, oh, we're gonna get like clones in the cover story, and Katakuri is gonna get folded by Caesar, and like be like, yeah, what are y'all talking about? And I think that's just part of the beauty of it, and why we speculate so much, because Oda is constantly blowing our minds with some of the direction of where he's going with the story. And to think, again, a Mads cover story Germa cover story that led to not only an abduction of Pudding, right, Aokiji, and showing him for the first time officially in his Blackbeard pirate gear, but also a Mads backstory, right?
Crazy.
Which is leading to some very important information on human cloning and freaking Stussy, and also connecting to the Rocks Pirates. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Because even in 1071, the cover story had, well, we don't know
the mystery.
It had a woman there, right? And we all was like, well, they got to be Stussy, right? Considering how many things she knew about Egghead, and she said, well, I haven't been here in a while. So, but it's funny that she said that though, because it's almost like if she's like, it's like a game, you know. You've seen Saw, right? Where I'm putting information out there on purpose to just kind of to see if you're gonna figure it out.
That's
so her saying that is like, yo, what?
That was the chapter when I said it, like in the middle of reacting, I was like, wait, is Stussy a triple agent? Yeah. And then like now, like at this point, like, you know, people are like, oh no, it'd be a double agent. They were correcting me, and I was like, but maybe with the Revs, maybe with Vegapunk, maybe with the Mads. Yeah. And then like Oda went crazier because there's an option where she's a quadruple agent in this chapter. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, we're not even sure of like what she really wants her affiliation. Because here's the thing that's crazy about Sissy, and we're going to talk about her a little bit later. One of the major things, and again, going back and rereading Whole Cake Island and finding out about like what Yanji said about clones to Sanji, something that's like driven home time and time again. Yeah, they don't know they're clones. They're just living life like if it's whatever.
Yeah.
What if Stussy finds out she's a clone?
Yeah, that's like, it's really interesting because we don't even know the source code of it. Because like, does Bakken know that she exists?
Does she know? Was she a willing participant to this experiment?
Yeah, like Jinbei didn't know a mini Jinbei was walking around, right? So like,
he didn't know.
Does Bakkens know? But then there's the caveat, right? Weevil. Where is Weevil from? Does
Where
Bakkens
Weevil
know?
come from? Did Bakken know about the cloning? That's why she went there, and that's where we're gonna talk a bit about Dr. Hogback and why he could be relevant here as well. But let's
even
the
fact that Dr. Hogback is in conversation
relevant
is
again.
Crazy.
Yes, he's relevant again. But we're gonna try to start from the beginning. We kind of pressed for time a little bit, but we're gonna try to take our time to go through it. Either way, it starts off by trying to throw us off, and Oda does that, where it talks about the girl that was a success, right? It's saying she's human, and the world does not know how she came to be.
Right.
And it also says it's a huge step toward world peace, whatever the hell that means.
Right. Yes.
Where you're saying a clone is the step towards world peace.
I'm so glad you're saying it like that, because that's how I am seeing it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it goes here, and then the first person we see is Bonney. Mm-hmm. And one thing we've always known is that Bonney has this somewhat underlying super importance in the story of One Piece, that even someone like Akainu was privy to her existence and saying, hey, we were really worried when you were gone. Like, who is she? Yeah. And if she is indeed a clone of whom? Right? And then her powers as well, with her being able to make a distorted future, it makes things even more scary. Like, because if she is a clone, right, and say she was a clone that was basically implanted a devil fruit upon creation, meaning she was born or created with the devil fruit, that's next level, bro. Yeah. Where, like, for her specifically, like, she was created and the green blood was not, like, artificially inseminated. It's like a part of her, like, lineage factor. You know what I mean? Yeah, yeah. And that's like like I've been, like, we're gonna try. The thing is, Oda structured this chapter in this way where it loops back, so we end up talking about things at the end and the beginning. But, like, I've been thinking about with what we saw out of Stussy and then what we saw at the Pacifistas. I'm like, damn, they went backwards. Like, the Seraphims kind of went backwards compared to her. And, like, what you're saying about Bonney, right? If she's a clone, I think a lot of the popular thought right now is Big Mom, because, like, people already had the theory that Big Bonney was one of the Charlotte, kids or whatever. But, like, it being a clone of Big Mom wouldn't be the craziest idea. And then, like you're saying, how is the devil fruit in the situation? And then we get the view of the what she's capable of. And like you're saying, I do think it's central. I think I might have actually, like, while you're saying it, I was like, I might actually know the name of her fruit, but, like, I don't know how it'd be in Japanese. Like, if you look at kind of like what's been the central point, it would probably be the evolution, the Evo fruit. It'd probably be something like that, right? Like, where, because she did make eggs turn to birds. Yeah. And so, like, she can evolve things, and the reason why that's important, and I think it was highlighted again, like, skipping a little bit, was she said, like, it's limited time on living creatures. And one thing that I remember I said in my Chopper video, I think it was, my Vegapunk video, I was saying that, like, I was thinking that maybe Vegapunk had, like, obviously it's wrong, but, like, I was hypothesizing that Vegapunk had, like, future sight, or, like, 3 eyes, that he could see certain futures. And so when it came to, like, Momo's fruit, he knew it was a failure before anyone even consumed it, because he could see the future potential of that fruit and all of his inventions, which is why he's such a prolific inventor, which we know now is there's a different explanation for all those things. But if you put Bonney into the equation, Bonney could have been really instrumental in a lot of his things, because then she could bring out the future of his inventions, or clones or whatever, and they could see what the fruit would look like, where it's like, say, for instance, he finishes the fruit and Bonney uses her power on that fruit. And then basically whatever's revealed is a different color as opposed to what the original devil fruit is. Yeah. And then that makes it easier for him. Or you could look at the lineage factor in the code and see that there's a slight difference between what it is with his fruit and what it was for Kaido's. And it's like, okay, there's a slight difference. I don't know exactly what the difference is, but it's not perfect. Right. And like, another way to look at it is maybe, like, we don't know how the distorted future or the different timelines work, because we saw, like, Luffy got aged to a weird, like, old timeline, like an alternate version of himself. And then we see Bonney hulking out and then turning into a kid and turning Vegapunk into a kid. We don't know the ramifications of that yet. Yeah. We could talk about that a little bit, but I was thinking, like, maybe, like, if you have the wrong devil fruit, right? Like, let's say Jinbei had the mochi fruit or some shit, and
And so Bonney ages him up, and then he ages to a poor timeline of Jinbei. But then they test out, okay, that's the wrong one. Then let's test the green blood on Sim Fruit, and then it's there. Not saying that was what happened here, because obviously she wasn't there, but maybe in the past, that might explain why the clones of the past, like Stussy, seem so much better than like a pacifista like Kuma's was, right? Like it could be because they had access to Bonney prior. It's interesting when you think about it like that.
Yeah, this chapter, it's scaring me a little bit because, for instance, they're making it seem like, well, Oda wrote this chapter for us to go from the front to the back and back to the front.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's distorted, right? It's almost like a distorted future. And then the scary part about it is this is like it's almost explaining what the Void Century could be, right? Where it's from front to back, back to front, from beginning to the end to the beginning. And so it's almost like I feel like something's coming. Like something major is coming that Oda is preparing us for, with how he's lining up this chapter, how he lined up this chapter, and how he gave us a glimpse of certain things with Bonney, with Kuma, with Vegapunk, and of course with Stussy. And so, as great as this chapter was, it feels like a setup, and I don't think we're ready for what's coming.
100%. I agree. Like even what you questioned in the intro of this page, right? They said, one, Mads is for the laboratory of peace, and apparently cloning was their culmination as a step towards world peace. And you were like, how does world peace get achieved through cloning? And like, there's so many other stories that we could draw from that. Like, people went wrong with cloning, blah, blah, blah. Even Germa, like Germa is an example in the story of why cloning is so unethical. In our world, there's so many problems with that. But like you're saying, and I've always said this too, where it's like the way Oda structured all of One Piece is, there's a reason why we always talk about parallels from different arcs. It's because Oda takes from the past and uses in the future, and then he draws these loops, and we know 1072 quadruple down on that. And like, then you think about, I always remember chapter 99, the first panel, it says like the legends of the future were stories of that endured in the past. And so this cloning stuff, like, right, like the ancient kingdom was this super advanced, civilization. For sure they were cloning 100%, because that's what we're seeing right now. So then you ask yourself, what is the missing step in our timeline with cloning? And we're probably about to learn it with Stussy, and then that next step is probably what happened in the Void Century. And then you got to ask yourself, is that where Eam comes in, right? Like we always feel like Eam's the antagonist, but it's probably something more or less like Eam was the hero or a good person of the Void Century, or maybe they were a person who was wrong. Maybe they are a clone, and they are the reasons why like the ancient kingdom got shut down, because as a clone they revolted or something like that. There's like you're saying, so much setup.
Let me ask you, so what about this perspective? I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. One of my theories about the Void Century is that, well, the plan was to somewhat replace the king, or replace the ancient kingdom, because they flew too close to the sun, right? And they were, like Vegapunk, super advanced in their thinking, but everything they were doing was going to distort the world. Because if they're at a place where they can clone people, and they were cloning people and creating these things that could stand the test of time, and trying to create a power source that could disrupt the actual flow of the earth, and making the earth an actual more dangerous place, and where the earth is legitimately at risk of being destroyed. Do you think it is wrong for then this group of kings to come together and say, hey, we saw how it was with the ancient kingdom being in control, we have to save the world by doing this? And so therefore, of course, the idea was not for this to be, of course, one person in charge, and for the celestial dragons to necessarily exist, but that's kind of what it materialized into. But also I think a part of that is the Nefertiti family, them stepping down and not going up with the celestial dragons to marry Jawah based on the outcome of things. But initially with them working together, was it for a noble cause, right? And if they were cloning and making different, experimenting on different things that could distort the world, did they do a bad thing, right? Like that's why it's like, hey, once you get to the One Piece, you're gonna have your own answer, because, hey, by the way, these people saved the world.
Right.
The world was gonna be destroyed if they continued the way they were going. They were trying to create an energy source that could, like, literally destroy everything. And so based on how things are now, were they wrong? And of course we can look at the celestial dragons and we see them and it's like, well, they could have a worse impact on the world than, you know, possibly a superpower or ancient weapons. But do you blame those kings for looking at what the ancient kingdom was doing and saying it can't continue like this? What do you think about that?
No, I think like that's a completely, like that makes a lot of sense. I feel like it, even with what you're saying, the clones could be on either side.
Yes.
It's really interesting because the cloning could be something that the ancient kingdom did and that was wrong, and all the other things that they did was wrong. You go back to like I have a whole video about the punk records, how I talked about how if punk records exist now, it probably existed back then. So what was their version of punk records? And if they achieved what Vegapunk said, like everyone was connected, then that could have went wrong, just like what Jinbei said. He's like, Vegapunk was thinking about it idealistically, but realistically, it could have went in a completely screwed up way. And again, like with what you're saying with like the ancient, the world government, I for a while now I was always feeling like actually no, we talked about it on stream together. We were talking about how, like, you know, like the Batman quote, like I always mess it up, like you're a hero and then you live to see yourself become the villain.
Yeah.
And I feel like the world government is probably that, where the other part of it is it's hard to not be the villain and it's hard to not repeat the history because absolute power corrupts. But if you also forget the history and the history is not available, but that's also contingent on you maintaining the order and control, then you are sailing a very slippery slope. And that's why the world government comes off as really, really awful, right? We see in like Saul's story in Robin's flashback where he's like, you know, Sengoku's just pushing the order, but then Saul's just like, wait, why? We're just researching history, right? Like, what's wrong with that? But like, you can't fathom how much that history can damage things on both sides. You know what I mean? Like, it could show that it could even
that it's
show
possible that, you know, like to do certain things that are considered forbidden. And it goes to a bunch of different anime and how like people strive to protect like history and protect like things that the powers that be deem to be forbidden, but they know the repercussions of it. Like I'm thinking of FMAB and how like the Sorcerer's Stone, right, or the Philosopher's Stone, where they're thinking like, hey, it's like I'm just researching the stone, but they're like, no, you really don't want to know the history behind the stone, right? But then they find out what the history is, and they're like, what? Like it's people you gotta sacrifice to like make this stone, and it's just like, damn. I guess I understand why it's something that it should be forbidden, but should the people know about that, right? Because it's I think about, this is another anime. I don't know if this might be. I'm not gonna spoil. But it's like an anime in which like to become stronger and to become a specific a level of power, it takes like 10,000 people dying.
Oh, yes.
Right. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just like, do you really want to know the true history of the world, considering what could possibly be, and then also informing people of what is possible, which could lead to it happening again?
Right. And like, and even with like these understands, like something else is like maybe the world government was the ancient kingdom and they just rebranded and they didn't want people to know that they were one and the same. And like you know, pulling off from other animes, I was like also contemplating the idea, like I've been thinking that this energy that they've been talking about, right? Like a lot of people have been saying dreams. I've been saying like imagination, which is like basically the same thing, but like there's like there's a narrative reason why imagination, specifically the word imagination, and like the way I've been talking about it, I even talked about in the Godfather Shanks video, where it's like the people, like if there's a reason why it's joy boy and not joy man, and it might be because kids are more imaginative.
Yeah.
And maybe
also,
clones are the way to farm imagination.
Not to cut you off, Par. Imaginations are more. You're more in control of your imagination than your dreams, right? It's more intentional.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And like kids are more imaginative, and so maybe clones, right? Like what did we see when we got on Egghead? They were like the kid clones, and we were like, like isn't this like these are children soldiers and stuff like that? Like, well, imagine if the ancient kingdom was kind of harnessing these kids in a messed up way, and that's what the world government wanted to save, right? Maybe they were like the community when they saw the kid seraphims. They're like, what the heck? These are children soldiers. There's slave labor, like all this stuff. It's pretty bad. And then there's another aspect to it, which makes this chapter so crazy, where it's like, I almost feel like that the world government might have been the side of the cloning. The reason why is because who's funding Vegapunk making these clones in the first place? They knew about the Seraphims. That's who's replacing the warlord. So they've been funding cloning. So
I think it's always going to be people. There are probably people within the world government, like you said, from the ancient kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And so, or affiliated, they know more about the ancient kingdom. And so what happened was, remember for Mads, they removed them. Right?
Yeah.
And
they procured them.
Right. They procured them, removed them, then they basically brought them into the world government as the research team.
Yeah.
Right. So for Vegapunk and everything they were doing, it was like, oh no, you shouldn't do this. This is illegal. Right.
Yeah.
But they're like, but how about you do this for us? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it just kind of shows you like, the world government, they're at a point, or what they do is, it's almost like sometimes what parents say to their kids, like, do what I say, not what I do. Right? And Oda has never been at the place or the writer that gives us things as straightforward, right? There's certain things where sometimes it's straightforward and we're like, there's no way, then it ended up being straightforward. And it was like, wait, what? Like Hiyori.
Right.
Like I remember when Hiyori, there was like, there's no way Kurosaki's Hiyori. It's way too obvious. Like this is way too obvious. Then it was like, okay, well, Kurosaki's Hiyori. There you have it. But then you have things that's obvious, but it's not, but then it is, with Denjiro and Kyoshiro. Right. And so I think the obvious thing here for the world government is that, oh, they were bad people. They did bad things. They overthrew good people.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I don't think it's that simple.
It's a mixed bag. 100%. And I think Oda wants us to, I think Oda wants that to be apparent right now, right? Like how, like, I feel like this chapter, like you introed it, it's like theory haven, theory breaker, whatever you want to call it. But like, I think the reason why theories come out is uncertainty. And I think Oda's like creating that uncertainty, like, what is Kuma's backstory? How painful is it? Where's Stussy from? The rocks pirates into Mads, like what, like all this stuff is so wild. And then like you said, the focal point, Oda chose to do this and start off with Bonney, and like whether her power is evolution, but she's core to the world government, and now they're making clones. Like, are they just making replacements for people, like you were saying? Like, are the Gorosei getting old and they need new Gorosei because they're the ones funding this stuff, right? And they the ones who need Bonney, I'm assuming. So it's like there's so many different angles, and somehow in 17 pages Oda just is like, yep, this is what I planned all along, guys.
I think it's scary. It's scary because we have no idea like what's true and what's real, but Oda's always kind of I think focus on an angle of who are the good guys, right? Yeah. Who do we look at as the good guys? Who are the good people that exist? And it's just like, well, they aren't any good guys, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody has certain flaws about them. Like that's why Film Red, I appreciate it a little bit more now when I think about it, with how it presents Shanks in somewhat of a flawed light, right? Where he was trying to protect, quote unquote, his daughter, but he abandoned her.
Yeah.
Right? He left her there by herself to kind of fend for herself, to protect her, I guess. But it just shows you just how there are things, and there I guess different sides to people that based on perspective, you could look at and be like, that's not good.
Yeah.
Where like some parents may be like, that's trash. Like you never leave a child. And other people may be like, well, it's the protector. Right? And I think they're going to be people, once we find out the history of the world, they're going to say, yeah, I understand why a coup was necessary. But, you know, some people are going to be like, well, no, that's still not okay. Like, you still don't do that to people. Right? But either way, it's not going to be just cut and dry as ancient kingdom good, world government people bad. It's not. Nothing truly ever really is, especially for something with this much build up. And I think, again, like with this chapter, it's kind of leading to that spot. And we can get some more specifics of the chapter with, like, I guess we can talk about Kuma and what Vegapunk here is interesting, right? Because what's straightforward and what's in our face is Vegapunk. He cares about Bonney, he cares about Kuma, and he basically had Kuma extract his memories, and he says for the sake of science or whatever, right?
Right.
But what about this? Him using Kuma to extract his memories, right? Think about what Vegapunk said his dream was. He wanted everyone to basically be a part of like one great thing, right? Where everyone is connected.
A hive mind.
Vegapunk now through Kuma has the ability to remove your memories and place it into one specific thing. So for Vegapunk, it would be evil, right? But if he did the same thing by basically extracting everyone's memories and putting it into one place and then forcefully, and then basically have it like it's for him and his punks where everyone is just on the same plane, but then you got to update from time to time. It's like he has a way to do that. Yeah. But how do you do that? You mass produce the ability. And so how do you mass produce the ability? Well, you mass produce Kuma. So Vegapunk could have his own plans. He could have his own like plan in regards to achieving his dream through the use of Kuma's ability. Like, and again, we look at Vegapunk and the things he did for Kuma as far as like extracting his memories and caring about Bonney. But if he's planning on like creating this hive mind, does that make him a good or a bad person?
Yeah, and like I think you're right on the money there, because it's like Oda very clearly told us that Vegapunk doesn't necessarily like, yeah, he stopped Caesar from like harming the kids, right? But like the whole thing that holds back Vegapunk more than not is money. Yeah. So he has the money and then he has his dreams, and like I don't think it's too crazy to think that a man just chases his dreams if he has all the things that are like in his bag, right? So it's like if like he wanted infinite energy, share that, and then he wanted everyone to be connected. Well, like if someone doesn't agree with him, he showed Jinbei. He's just like, Jinbei seemed to be someone who didn't agree. What would he do? Like, would he just be like, well, it doesn't matter?
What would a version of himself do?
Yeah, like that. It's
you know
like
mean?
Yeah, and then we're talking about the satellites, right? Like there's a lot of people thinking that there's someone who's going to be a traitor, right? And like Shaka could.
What if Shaka is that guy, and Shaka is quote unquote good at logic, right? But for him, what's logical and what's best for Vegapunk is remaining with the world government, considering the resources and the powers that be, because technically they're still the superpower, right? Yeah. And so if Shaka feels like that's the best thing for Vegapunk and the satellites, he's not thinking I'm betraying you guys. I'm helping you guys. It's kind of like Poof and Hunter x Hunter, right? Where I'm doing things to help the king because I'm thinking this is for the king's own good. Even though technically I'm betraying the king if the king knew I was doing this.
It'll be interesting to see how much, because we don't know how much separation there is between the Vegapunks. We do know that there's like a hierarchy. They listen to the main Vegapunk and they also listen to Shaka. But like, how much, like we know that they're tied to the memories, but I've also been wondering too, especially with the Stussy reveal, how much do the satellites know of the main Vegapunk's brain? Is there like things that he could do to prevent them from knowing? And is that his fatal flaw? He didn't share all the information. So Shaka, with the logic he has because he doesn't have all the information, he becomes a traitor in the same light that you're talking about, where it's like, he sees the main Vegapunk becoming too selfish or something, and then the world government, like maybe he's still good, maybe he sees the end goal that's more similar to Dragon, right? Because he called Dragon. That's not something that the main Vegapunk did, that's what Shaka did. So maybe, and like he himself told, like none of the other satellites told Dragon that they were dying, it's just Shaka. So then it was like maybe Shaka has his own thing. And when that was brought up at the Reverie, I didn't think too much of the traitor thing, but then this chapter, his dialogue, I was like, yo, Shaka's kind of sus. Like this is a little interesting with what he said this chapter.
Like I said, and then again, the perspective is going to be interesting, because if he does that and it's to protect the satellites, is he a bad person? Because people just look at him at like he's a traitor, you know? And so I think this presents so many possibilities. And I'm rereading what Vegapunk is saying to Kuma here. He is saying, yo, you can take pain out of someone, right? Yeah. And you're basically making nerve signals wireless and transmitting them. If you can apply that logic to other signals, can you do the same things with imagination and memories?
Yeah, that
is pure, like, for him. That is not for Kuma. He's thinking about himself with that one.
It sounds manipulative for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, because it's almost like, I think this is the fallacy with a lot of smart people and geniuses in our world too. Like, I mean, Elon Musk, right? Not to bring his name here, you know, people support him, whatever. But I feel like a lot of the times you see like a smart person like him, when they get pushed back on their geniusness, they're like, oh, if only you could understand me. If only you could hear, right? And so then imagine Vegapunk learned how to harness that and then give everyone his imagination and his memories, and then there would be no disagreeing. And I think that's where the scary thing is. I think the thematic, right, the name of the chapter is Weight of Memories, according to the current translations, but you talked about it too, where it's like, you know, if everyone's a hive mind and that's forced, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I think of it like in a romantic way, it could be a great thing because it creates empathy, right? Like a lot of people don't know, but we spent like 5 hours before this call talking and catching up, and like, and like that makes this conversation easier, but also like, you know, it makes, you know, all of our conversations more like it's easier to communicate, right? And communication's the huge problem, where it's like, you know, like that's the reason why Naruto has talk no jutsu. That's how powerful communication is, right? And a lot of solving problems is like, oh, if only you understood. And like, hey, if the world knew about the Void Century, maybe they would understand why the world government did it. Maybe they wouldn't, but like that missing memory, the missing history, all of that stuff is being,
you don't give them the choice, the option.
Right. And we're seeing that exact same thing with Bonney. Don't touch the thing. It's full of pain. And she's like, no, this is memories. I need to know.
Like, again, lying.
How painful can these memories be?
It could be a situation where we think he's like lying because he doesn't want her, because of what Kuma said. What if he doesn't want her to find out exactly like his true purposes behind it?
And he wants to manipulate it himself.
Yes.
Right?
Because again, like you said, super manipulative, because what he does is Kuma is about to sacrifice himself, right?
Yeah.
Like, for whatever reason, he wanted to do that. In the midst of that, he's like, yeah, but what if you could, you know, remove your memories and keep those things for yourself, right? Right. And it's almost as if he's like, again, knowing that he's in this vulnerable position and kind of almost saying, hey, this is for you, and this allows you to live on even after you sacrifice yourself, when he's really thinking, yeah, but what about if I do my thing here and the hive mind and having everyone, but now knowing that there's literally an ability that can extract memories. Yeah. That's pushing his agenda forward.
And what's really interesting too, it's like that I think it's a growing possibility that Vegapunk ends up a character like that, because then it would show the flaw in the science, right? All of the scientists in Mads had like a fatal flaw at the end of their thing, right? Like Queen was the pathogen. It
seems like they became obsessed with their creations.
Yes, exactly. So why not Vegapunk? He could be the exception.
He's the ultimate one. It's like he could be. But so far, I think it doesn't seem that way. Like,
yeah, I mean, we didn't come into Vegas. Like, I feel like a lot of us came in with the same feeling as Frankie, where Frankie's like, oh my God, it's Vegapunk.
excited,
Oh my God,
it's
it's so cool.
Vegapunk. This is a
But
celebrity.
Senior Pink?
He's a celebrity.
What happened to Senior Pink? Oh, it's fine. Oh, Children's Soldiers? It's fine. You know, like we kept on seeing these things in our face, but it's Vegapunk.
It's fine.
You know
It's Vegapunk. Like, of course, it's, this person is not a bad person. And think about, like, for the Seraphim, right?
Yeah,
They're labeled as possibly the strongest beings in existence.
And I think that panel was the one that shifted, because everyone looked at that, was like, wait, so he knows, like he knows, like, and his face there was like, oh, he really knows what he's doing.
He understands what he's doing. He understands what he created.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think it took to get here?
That's it. I think the line where it's like, it stands out to me. I think Dragon to me is that character that he might have a flaw as well, but I think he's probably the closest to being the most like sacrificial towards the greater good of the entire world. And the reason why I say that is because when Vegapunk uses like, I thought you were against war. I thought you were against fighting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of implies like, and we saw in the cover story, Vegapunk is like was holding a gun and had a bandage. He's scrapping with people apparently with this big ass forehead, right? So it's like we don't know where Vegapunk, like we see where where Oda gave us the illusion that we're getting the backstory of Mads and Vegapunk, but we're not. We're actually not really understanding Vegapunk really. No. And like
not yet, at least.
Yeah, he could be a good character, fine, but like you can't gloss over like there's a directive here, right? Like I feel like in order to do the right thing in Vegapunk's mind of overthrowing the government, right? He had the Seraphims, he had the things, the world's greatest powers. Like, could he not have done it already? Like, does he know about Eam already and he knows that he can't take it over? Or like you're saying, he's self-motivated toward this dream and he doesn't necessarily care of the other part yet. You know what I mean? Like he cares, but he doesn't care. It's a little interesting. We're in a gray area for sure. And I think like one of those things, the wireless transmission of nerve signals, that's something that I've been talking about a while now for like the elemental hockey stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was actually something that I thought Anel was doing, because when we got introduced to observation hockey, it was through Mantra on Skypiea, and lo and behold, the peak fruit there was electricity, and he had like to the point where you could almost say that he had future sight, right? But was it future sight, or was it like amplified by his fruit? Well, he told us it was amplified by his fruit. And I always thought about nerve signals back then. Well, nerve signals are electricity, and from then Oda started this like nerve game in my head, and I'm like amazed in how he's brought it here, because I didn't think he'd go super scientific where he's just like, pain and memories, they're just nerves in your brain firing. Nothing is different other than the pathways and the type of cells, but like memories and imagination, same thing. They're just nerves firing different electrical signals. And when you think about what Vegapunk was talking about, like harnessing infinite energy, well, like imagination sparks your nerves, right? Like, so one way or another, there's a loop around here where it seems like, Vegapunk's dream, his motivations, his actions, they are selfish, right? Like they are. And like him getting off the island, we still don't know what purpose that is, because I've always questioned this in this light, where it's like he knows how strong Luffy is. Like he has a Yonko crew and he knows who he's up against. Why doesn't he just commission them against them, right? Like it's a little interesting in that regard. So there's so many things that like Oda's did in this chapter that just and this isn't even the biggest one, if we're being honest. Like like we've like talked about Vegapunk a lot, and we got to wrap it up in really quick, but we can talk about Stussy. Go ahead. One thing I want to real quick was like another loop that Oda did was, you mentioned Hogback, but for me the bigger one was with asterisks on Hogback real quick, but that's a throwback to Thriller Bark, but also the 21 grams of mass. That is a real theory in real life.
Yes.
And I've talked about that in the Shadows theory, and that might be a because what we know, Oda established two things that leave your body when you die. From Brook, it's your soul, but along with your soul is your shadow. And I'm almost thinking like, it's like 10 grams is your shadow and 11 grams is your soul. And I'm just like, it's crazy because now while we're like discussing that, and I think the way they described Brooke's soul, and I think Cole covered this more than I did, but they said that like Brooke's soul, like the way his power worked, it was expending a lot of energy in order for him to be in like manifest his devil fruit. And that could be one and the same thing, right? Like, how is he functioning? Like, how is he doing any stuff? Like, he doesn't have nerves. Someone said that, but like, is it going through a different route? Is the soul managing to do that? Is that also tied into this too? Like, it's like, could Kuma or Law separate those things, your shadow and soul, not just Moria? There's so many different things. Could it, like, if Anel was sitting in this room, could Anel also like pull out your nerve signals? Like, I don't know, like that. He apparently so, because he can control all of electricity, right? Like, there's so many ways to think about this.
I think that's really interesting. The 21 grams thing is like, I feel like Oda is bringing back our boy Hog back, because he's obviously, well, not obviously, I don't think he's dead, right? Because going back and I was rereading like Thriller Bark, and at the end when they're sailing away with Absalom, like Hogback is like praising Blackbeard, right? He's like, man, look at all this great stuff Blackbeard is doing. Like, he caught Ace, right? And so it's funny that they probably ran into Blackbeard or the Blackbeard Pirates somewhere, and I would not be surprised if Hogback is starting to work. He's working with Blackbeard now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think with just, again, connections, let's go back to Stussy really quickly, right?
Yes.
And round it up with that. I'm sure you've heard about this, the Whole Cake Island thing, right? Where the giraffe, and she's the first one to drink the giraffe juice. Then
I just want to point out, those are the details I focus on in my videos, and so many times people are like, that shit doesn't matter. Then Oda doesn't care about it. No, he does. Like, this is proof.
Clearly he does. And I think the Wano one is even more crazier, because he had Higurashi transform into Stussy, using the clone fruit, mind you. And then to go even further, this didn't have to happen, right? Transformed into Shiki, and then transformed back into herself. Yeah. So she transformed into Stussy, who was a clone and a former member of the Rocks Pirates, and then to drive it home, have her transform into Shiki, who's a confirmed member of the Rocks Pirates as well. Yep. It's just like, it's like, and the thing is, we saw the woman's like, who is that? Yeah. Like, we don't. It's Stussy. Yeah. And so it's now like with, and Oda basically told us like, hey, Stussy's a clone of Miss Buckingham of the Rocks Pirates. Yeah. Right. And so, and it's the same katakana as Bakken, so it's 100% Bakken's. Yes. And Bakken's, Marco was saying, used to sail. Yeah, it was Rocks Pirates. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's even further confirmation, letting us know, hey, what happened in Wano, or the old hag, more than likely that was her first interaction with Kaido. She was maybe working with the Rocks Pirates back then. Yeah, and that explains one of my biggest questions. I said it at the Reverie, and this still isn't answered, but why would Kaido listen to Higurashi? And it would make sense if Higurashi was on the Rocks Pirate. There's some kind of seniority, some kind of like credibility, and then that would explain the end of Kaido's backstory to a certain extent for sure. Yeah. But like, now Higurashi is a very interesting character. Yeah, it makes her more interesting because Oda somewhat made it seem like she was whisked away. Obviously, she's dead now because Bankai has the devil fruit. But Oda made it just like, oh, it's a throwaway. Don't worry about her. Kaido killed her, right? And it's kind of like, Like, I was always wondering about that. Like, what? There has to be more to Higurashi, right? Yeah. Like for her, again, she transformed into Shiki, meaning she was close enough to interact with Shiki, interact with Stussy, and she basically seeked out Kaido to use him to take over Wano. So it's like she's a really important person in the history of things. We just don't know enough, and Oda is bringing it all back full circle with this chapter. Wait, I'm so glad you're focusing on Higurashi, because I feel like all the conversation I've been in, nobody's mentioned her to this degree, and I'm wondering, because you made your video, but like, do you feel like because maybe I should just hit you with what I was thinking, and then you could tell me if this is what you're thinking. Yeah. Because for me,
sure, Bakins, right, could have been on rocks, and then she left for Mads, and she was the progenitor of the Stussy clone.
Yes.
And that could make sense. And then she leaves and is bitter, and she goes after Whitebeard's money through Weevil, who was a part of the, all the cloning process, which is, and that's really interesting to me because Stussy was the first successful clone, and Weevil's obviously not, like, I don't care what anyone says, it's not a successful clone. So then you would have her kid first before Stussy, and like the order of operations there is very interesting, and it's possible. And then the way I was thinking about it was it doesn't solve this issue, because a lot of people brought up, like, wait, wouldn't Big Mom know Stussy from Rock's Pirates? Like, it's a little interesting with the timeline, but maybe she was looked different. Maybe she's a different age. Maybe Bakins looked different then, and there's like some sort of process as to why Stussy ended up looking different, as we know that's the case with Big Mom, right? Big Mom looked really different as a kid, really great in the 20s and 30s, and then really interesting older, right? Yeah. Who's to say Bakins didn't go through a similar transition, and maybe even more interesting? And the reason why I say that is because I think, and I could be wrong, but it could be that Higurashi. So in the 1070, the mystery woman, it could be that Higurashi was like low key that person, and she was just Stussy, and she had all of the Rock's DNA, and because she was on the thing, and she's actually the person who was there. And so because of her, they had access to all the DNA, because that's something that a lot of people forget about the clone fruit. There is some discrepancy there, but when we were introduced to it, it said it copied the body exactly, to the point where when Bon Clay changed into Luffy, he had Luffy's strength. He didn't have his devil fruit power, but he has like everything. And we don't know the extent of that fruit, because we know that some people can use the fruit better than others. And apparently one of the distinctions that we made on the stream and on the wiki is that Higurashi, Bon Clay has to touch his face in order to transform. Higurashi doesn't. And a lot of fruits have like different, I would imagine, like not everyone can use Katakuri's fruit the same way, right? So maybe there's a higher end to Bon Clay's fruit, where what do we see with Vegapunk? It seems like blood seems to be the important thing. What if when she transforms, the blood goes there too? So then you get a situation where Weevil could make sense, where maybe by cloning Kaido or Whitebeard or Shiki or like those Rocks Pirates, that's how you end up getting a Weevil situation, because he has like Shiki's hair, but he has like Whitebeard's mustache or something. Yeah. And but it wasn't perfectly correct, which is why Stussy's is an interesting one, because maybe it was easier to do Stussy's, and maybe they all just assumed that was the case. Like, I don't know. It's so interesting, because I feel like
they got their wires crossed somewhere. Yeah,
and I feel like rather than Bakins being the center point, it almost makes more sense for Higurashi to be the center point. And also considering the fact, like, after Kaido escaped Punk Hazard, Higurashi was there. Also, Orochi, when Orochi was talking to CP0, there's so many things that he could ask for, but he asked for Vegapunk, right? So maybe, and we know that Higurashi laid the master plan for Kaido and Orochi. So maybe Higurashi was the one like, hey, eventually you need Vegapunk, right? Like, it could be something like that. Like, why would Orochi go out of his way for that and bargain for that? Like, yeah, maybe he knows about all these things, but Orochi seemed just fine with just being the Shogun of Wano, right? Like, but he knew that Vegapunk was important for something other than, what he was already doing. So maybe it was Higurashi who planted that seed, just like she planted the seed in Kaido. And it would be really interesting, because then Wano is a lot more interesting too, because
not that she's a master manipulation, because she didn't manipulate Orochi before then, and low-key, if she manipulated Kaido as well, then manipulated all of like Mads, it's like she's a key figure in history that isn't going to get the acclaim until we like find out the true story.
Yeah, and like I don't want to like say this is like a theory of mine. Even like the Weevil one, I was like floating around like, you know, all the people. I saw the Shiki thing and the Whitebeard thing, but the Kaido one could make sense too. Like why not all of them into one person? That could be his like tragic story.
Yeah.
But like the other one being that like right now we don't know Zoro's backstory. So I know the Hidden Island was like throwing out like, oh, is Zoro's Ryuma's clone? And like you know, you started out like we don't know who is a clone, right? And if Higurashi was the progenitor of the DNA, maybe she had Ryuma's DNA somehow because she was on Wano. Like we don't even really know the full scope of how that works, right? Because all the dead bodies were there. Who's to say she can't touch like the corpse and then boom, get the DNA that way?
The extent of like her reach and also her abilities, and so. But one thing we know that she's very dangerous, right? Yeah. And so I think at this point with Higurashi and everything she's done and accomplished, you have to really keep her in the back of your mind when you think about just the history and the future of One Piece, and also what's her connection with Bakken, right? Just a bunch of different things has happened that she could have had her hand in because of how devastating a devil fruit she has, right? Where she can literally clone people and take on a different identity. And so, like you said, you're right. She could have been that person that was there with them.
You just hit me over the head with it. The fruit is called the clone fruit. Why wouldn't it be important to this? We're talking about clones.
Yeah.
Wait, that's kind of
maybe like you said, maybe she was the one there, right? And and it would make sense as well if you're, oh my God, if like say you're trying to clone people, wouldn't it be great to understand the lineage factor of that devil fruit that can do that exact thing?
Yeah. Well, yo, hold on. Yeah. I think he, and that, for me, that's really good, in terms of like, not defending Wano, but the thing about Wano I've always said is that Wano will loop back somehow, one way or the other. We didn't get Zoro's backstory for a reason. Maybe we didn't get Yamato's backstory for a reason. We don't know where Yamato came from. Apparently Kaido left rocks, got Higurashi and Yamato and King. Why didn't Oda want us to see that? Maybe even like after Wano I said like, is Yamato a Seraphim? Maybe Yamato is a clone. Like what kind? Because then you're wondering like, the way Kaido talked about Yamato was like she's a full-blooded Oni. How do you get a full-blooded Oni? We barely know Onis. Like, and then where is the other Oni? Like, was it Black Maria?
Did she figure out a way to create Yamato through Kaido's DNA?
Yeah, like maybe it's just that. And then that's another thing. Technically, Higurashi could probably just turn into Kaido. Can she not? Like, she just turned into, right? Like,
it is fascinating. It is fascinating the deeper you get because you're starting to connect the dots and see just how deep it could go. And just how scary it is. So, man, that's
here's the thing. Crazy. Here's another thing that actually, now that we're talking about this, that kind of just, so I have to double back on the timeline. Actually, this is one of my first like Voice of All Things streams. It seems I do on Sundays. Way back in 2022. It was when we got Kaido's flashback. I decided to do a timeline stream. And one of the weird things that I'm pretty sure we didn't figure out yet is Higurashi, at the same time she was with Kaido off of Wano, she was also grooming Orochi to a certain extent. So like she was there and acting as Sukiyaki, and it was the same year. And I'm like, wait, how did she do both? Like, how did she get on and off of Wano? But now maybe Higurashi was cloned, and that the Higurashi beforehand. Okay, maybe Higurashi isn't even dead. Maybe the one kind of killed is in the real war.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane now. It's insane now what we know of and what the possibilities could be, because all these things with Rocks happened when she was younger. It could have been that could have had multiple Higurashis, right? And it could have been a bigger plan, not even made by her. It could be somebody else just like behind all of it.
Here's another thing. How does CP0 get connected to an isolated country like Wano like that? You know what I mean? Wouldn't it make sense if Higurashi was the link for that too? Because is Orochi smart enough for that? No. Was Kaido doing that? No. I don't even know if he like was brokering any of the deals, right? Like he was just doing his own kind of thing, and Orochi was kind of messing around. So and everything Orochi did was Higurashi. So Higurashi might be the reason why CP0 is there. And if her clone was Stussy, and that was inserted into CP, it would all make so much more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole a bit later today. Unfortunately, we gotta cut it short. Par.
Yeah,
That was great, man. That was great.
This is the great chat. Here's one last thing. Is it a devil fruit that Stussy have? Like this clone?
Yes, but I don't think it's a natural devil fruit.
Ah, okay. All right.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Par. I think with the Reverie. What Reverie was that?
11?
11?
Yeah.
Hosted by Randy. I think he did a great job in that Reverie, man. As far as just like driving the conversation forward and being like, one of the guys that's like just, procuring different theories and making different connections. I think that's what the Reverie is all about. So just, definitely want to, it's crazy, especially like, considering like, when we met and we started talking about One Piece and stuff like that, and like where kind of we were like I'm just I'm here with One Piece, I want to make content, want to talk about it, and then like kind of driving the conversation forward, and like something like the Reverie is just like it's just amazing to see, man. So just wanted to give you your flowers on that one because I thought it was great.
I appreciate that, Brago. I'm honored also, like, you were the first person to collab with me on the YouTube level, and then the Reverie, I don't know what kind of strings people pulled, people that Gorers say are the emperors in the background. No, but
can't speak on it.
But I think like this Reverie, it was a lot of fun because there was a lot of like people that I got to know. And a lot of people and like I just enjoy the conversations. I was I'm a new father now, so I came into the Reverie sleepless and I left the Reverie sleepless, and it was all a jam.
It prepared you, bro. It prepared you. That's all it is. But no, I thought it was fantastic. And again, shout out to Par's channel will be in the description and be in the title. You guys enjoy this content, make sure to like, subscribe, give your thoughts. And we covered, it wasn't a typical breakdown because we didn't go like beat for beat, and we kind of went in a way that was like speculative based on the information we got, but I think grounded in a lot of fact. So you guys, I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy it. But yeah, drop a like, subscribe to Par, and we'll definitely catch you guys in the next one, man. Peace out.